The introduction to the game mode says it all. Upon finishing the campaign mode of World at War, you're not being greeted by credits or achievements. Instead, you just find your character waking up in a small, desolate building with a sudden zombie invasion going on. And the only question you have is, what the fuck just happened? If you're like me and you're born at a very young age, you probably grew up playing Call of Duty Zombies. I was quite heavily invested in the earlier games like World at War, Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2. But the newer games just didn't really cut it for me, and today you're gonna be finding out why. Now there's a clear distinguish between the World at War and Black Ops 1 maps, and that being like their time periods, because World at War plays out at World War II and Black Ops 1 plays out during the Cold War. Nacht der Untoten perfectly works as the first map, because it's the one where you feel the most helpless. The wall weapons are ass and the area is just extremely tight and difficult to maneuver through. The location offers nothing special in itself, but that's why it works so perfectly. Just a soldier in World War II finding himself in some abandoned and remote location who suddenly encounters the undead. The point of the map is just to set the tone on what's further going to happen, and it does that perfectly in my opinion. Next up we have Verrückt, which appears to be a Nazi psychiatry. The tight passages and uncanny background noises manage to make you feel very uncomfortable and haunted. You encounter a bloody dentist chair and occasionally hear people screaming, which naturally brings up questions such as patients being experimented on. Is the zombie spread out the result of a Nazi experiment gone wrong? No clear answers anywhere. All you have are some clues which can potentially lead to a conclusion. Shinonoma is set in a Japanese settlement within a swamp. There aren't that many details that can be derived from the map except one. I can't tell if that was intended or not, but this map, which is set in Southeast Asia, subtly tells you that this outbreak is playing out on a global scale. Again, not sure if it was intended or not, but it works. The Riese takes another big step forward. Now we're facing this giant machine at the map's center and lots of research papers. The big machine, obviously being the Pack-a-Punch, tells us that there's some big technological advancement going on. We find ourselves back in Germany and see that this experiment has way more depth to it than simply just being a failed attempt at biological weaponry. As you keep on opening doors and going through the buildings, you encounter lots of blackboards and research papers, equations and such, which makes you think that there's actually a lot more to it than just simply a plague that's spread out because of fucking failed science experiments or some shit. Now, Kino der Toten doesn't really offer anything new. It only further manifests the Nazi origin and advanced teleportation and weapon upgrades that we already found on Der Riese. One thing that it actually does is it introduces the characters that you're playing with this whole time. These being Nikolai, Dempsey, Takeo and Richthofen. But it's not doing that through some sort of forced up introduction, but through letting you see their portraits if you're attentive enough. Same thing kind of goes for 5. Doesn't really add anything to further progress the story, but it sets another tone. That we have political enemies, these being Fidel Castro and JFK, having to fight side by side, meaning that humanity has one common enemy now. And honestly, it was probably more of a design choice because they already designed the Pentagon for the campaign, so they were thinking, why don't we just make a Pentagon-themed zombies map, because it's a low-hanging fruit, whatever. Ascension plays out in a Soviet cosmodrome where research on space and hidden advanced technology was performed. Turns out the Soviets also were experimenting with 115, the substance that is responsible for the zombie outbreak. But the element 115 seemingly wasn't intended to be a biological weapon, but instead to control time and space, shown by the teleports earlier on in Der Riese and Kino der Toten. There's also a reason why our crew that originated in World War II happens to be in a Soviet fucking spaceland from the 60s. The zombie outbreak was just a casualty that came along. So it was not just the Nazis doing secret experiments with potential to fuck us up on a global scale, but also the Soviets. But definitely not the Americans. They of course would never ever be daring to do such horrendous things, right? This is also the first time where you actually have a goal to accomplish within a zombies map. That goal being rescuing a scientist from the ether, which is the universe you teleport through. So in a sense, a form of chamber that lets you float through time and space how you wish. It's not like a multiverse type thing, I would say it's more of that underlying structure that our universe has, so to speak. And this is where the whole story actually takes a really big turn and starts becoming extremely complicated with multiple layers of complexity that later on turns to be a complete shit show, but we'll get to that later. Call of the Dead breaks the fourth wall, so to speak, by casting actual actors, with one of them being George A. Romero, who is seemingly known to write pieces about zombie outbreaks. I suppose I kinda wanted to pay tribute to him. Richthofen's crew is stuck inside a room and they require the player's help to keep further advancing. Because they keep teleporting, but they can't really control where they're being teleported at. Things get even trickier in Shangri-La. Shangri-La? I don't know how to pronounce it, bro. You see, it's an ancient temple that also has insanely advanced technology. ancient civilizations also seemingly interacted with the Substance 115. And as you keep further playing the game, you realize that you experience the temple through different time periods at the same time. In a sense, this temple is stuck in a time loop, like the timelines are all kind of like falling apart and together at the same time, so you experience it from the past, the present, and the future together. And that is indicated by the ancient stones alongside the advanced technology. The crew keeps using teleport, but its nature is very unpredictable. You don't really get to choose where you're being teleported at, you just appear at places with the highest 115 activity. Which makes my inner physicist think that the element 115 has a gravity component within the ether, meaning you are simply attracted to the biggest mass of 115 there is while you're teleporting. Which then leads our character to Area 51. Seemingly the Americans were also doing some bullshit with that. Within Area 51, they encounter a giant teleporter which teleports them all the way to the fucking moon. And in fact, there's actually a base on top of the moon. It was set up by the Nazis, which means that we are in an alternate universe where Nazi Germany managed to land on the moon and even established a base on top of it. The Nazis were knowingly experimenting with the occult and set up a crew called the Mysterious Pyramid Device. Because it was said that there's a pyramid-shaped object that enables you to control the ether and thus time and space. And that was Richthofen's entire goal to begin with. He just wanted to rule over the world and shape it according to his beliefs. Thus he decides to launch a nuclear rocket onto the Earth and destroy anyone that could potentially interfere with his plan. And keep in mind, they don't just teleport through space, but they also travel through time. And you may think, at what time period did we establish an entire base with a fucking plant biome inside it at the moon? And all that displayed in the year 2025, as we get to see later in Black Ops 2. Happy New Year, by the way. The reason why this form of storytelling is so genius is because you could practically just play the game for hours and hours to come without realizing any of the things that I just previously said. And I know that for a fact because that was me. I always kept on playing these games, but I never knew what the fuck is actually going on. The teleports could just be a cool gameplay mechanic without much depth to it. The maps could be entirely made out of lazy design choices to fit the game's campaign. But if you manage to even notice and hell even connect the dots, it requires you to have an enormous amount of perspicacity, especially considering that you'll be running away from zombies all the time. A large chunk of the story plays out in our heads because, at least in previous games, we are not held any big cutscenes or text walls. We're just thrown into different scenarios, having to figure out what the fuck happened on our own. And the story isn't exactly linear, and you will find lots of plot holes if you just look out for them, but it's not a story game anyway. It's just a survival game with an overly complex story it's just a survival game with an overly complex story which it managed to bring across in the most subtle way possible. As in order to even do these quests and these Easter eggs, you're gonna have to do the most random shit to trigger these events. Like, I'm talking, you gotta shoot this 3 times, you gotta walk there, you gotta activate this, you gotta like jump in the air 3 times and walk around the circle. Like random shit, you wouldn't even come up with that. It has no sense of continuity whatsoever. Without looking up any further guides, you're left by yourself mindlessly shooting zombies and having to picture what the fuck is going on all the time. Leaving things up for interpretation and letting the player experience it on their own, in my opinion, is the best way to bring across the story. Because it makes you relate to the character. Think of it like this: you are going through real life right now, doing real life things without knowing the entire lore of another person you're interacting with. So all your choices are nothing but you acting upon your own interpretations and perceived probability of things that are more likely to occur when a certain action takes place. And that is the reason why I much prefer the older games instead of the newer ones, because newer ones, although they're more cinematic and such, I preferred the mysterious and subtle storytelling of the older games, by far. Like, even at that point it was already kind of a shit show, and later on, like, it featured dragons and such, and I was thinking, it's kind of drifting away from the things that I like. Like, it was fun to play, but the World War II Cold War themes kind of felt more, I don't know, it was just kind of cooler, to be honest. Anyway, that was my take on Call of Duty Zombies, which in my opinion is nothing short of a masterpiece. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and please subscribe because I need to pay my fucking bills. Have a nice day.